Welcome to Rock Docs, a podcast about music documentaries brought to you by Treble Media, treblezine.com. We have previously shouted out some of their writings about Led Zeppelin, who is, again, the subject of today's episode. But check out all their music writing, Treble Zine. They're great, and we thank them. I'm Dave Lizerbram, here with my co-host,
Andrew Keatts.
And Andrew, no guests today, just you and me.
Old school.
Way
it used to be.
Becoming Rock Docs. That's going to be the about our early days.
Yeah. Just waxing. Be like, we used to come up with a premise for like a 10-minute discussion at the top of every episode.
We started out as a skiffle group, actually, and then turned into a podcast. It's for very rare turn of events for the 2020s, but so we're talking about Becoming Led Zeppelin, a 2025 documentary directed by Bernard MacMahon about Led Zeppelin. It's a new one. It's out now. If you're listening to this, relatively speaking, in real time, probably be streaming near you very soon. And
it is streaming everywhere right now on Netflix.
Oh, it's on Netflix now. Well, what do you know?
Added this weekend, as far as I know.
Oh my God, I watched it last week and paid for it. Gee whiz.
Sucker.
Well, maybe my opinion. Okay, so all right. So this is about the early days of Led, the origin story, and then the early days, basically through the first two albums, Led Zeppelin 2. Mm-hmm. And then that was it. Then they stopped making music, and that was the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the story, basically.
That's
as far
it.
And good for them. Those two albums that they made were lovely. I hope all four of them are living nice, happy lives now.
From 1970 on, basically nothing occurred. 69 on, I guess. Basically nothing occurred until Jack White found Jimmy Page in I think it was like 2008, and said, I've got this buddy from this band that came about in the years that you were out of commission. We should make a movie about playing the guitar together.
Yeah, this is our third Jimmy Page joint, I guess.
Third
now
Jimmy
that you're
Page
mentioning
joint.
it, we've done The Song Remains the Same. We've done It Might Get Loud, and now we're doing Becoming Led Zeppelin. And I'm gonna just sort of go out on a limb and say the Jimmy Page rock doc filmography is a little rough. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Yeah, it's not a strong one. I mean, the way I think about it is, you say this a lot. You're always like, a lot of these bands, the market for product around them is such that like they really get one shot at a documentary.
Yeah.
Now, Led Zeppelin is not one of those bands. No. They are a band that could support many a rock doc, and even still, they're still searching for one that's good. As far as I can tell,
I think there's like one of those classic albums ones about like Led Zeppelin 4 or something, House of the Holy or something. Like maybe that's good. Haven't seen it. Love the classic albums. We should do more of those.
Yeah, I'm sure that.
Why don't we just do those? Those are good. They're like an hour long. What are we doing with ourselves?
You guys will notice this. Starting next week, we're just becoming a classic albums rewatch podcast because
hard pivot. Yeah,
we can at least guarantee the quality. Yeah, I've never once seen an episode of that it wasn't fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so so this is an authorized, on the record.
Yeah.
Boy, if you it is so sort of down the middle.
Yes.
To say, okay, we're doing a documentary about a classic band. Mm-hmm. We got all the surviving members set for interviews. The member who doesn't survive, you're not going to believe this. We found an interview that had previously been unknown.
Yeah.
We've remastered the live footage. The audio was mixed by probably somebody famous. I don't know. And it's in IMAX. Like they're doing all the things.
Yeah. Yeah,
you can't say they didn't do those things.
You cannot say that they did not do those things that you just listed.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just lift a veil here. I just this movie is so lacking of anyone who's inspired to be doing it.
This has a paycheck written all over it.
It
Okay,
sure does.
let me tell you where this movie goes wrong.
I'd love to hear it because I was
I'm gonna
wondering
tell
all
you.
night.
I'm going to tell you when I was like, I should just get this. Train should not
Before
be-
anybody gets annoyed at that this is just going to be a dunk session. There's stuff in here I like, and I'm going to talk about it. There's moments. There's all kinds of good stuff. Obviously, it's Led Zeppelin. You know, like the floor is pretty high.
Yeah.
But like the film as a piece, like was honestly perplexing to me about how much it just sits there.
Okay, here's where it goes wrong. Okay.
Yeah.
I press play. I didn't see this in the theater, so I saw it on streaming. I press play. The first thing I see on my screen, PG-13. I'm out. Okay.
Yeah.
Already knew. Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
What are we doing here? Okay. And it was like PG-13 for like loud noises. You know what I mean? It was like exactly. Occasional, rock and roll. Like this is when I grew up in my day, when kids were cool,
right?
We talk about Led Zeppelin, and it was like,
it's like the hardest band in the world.
The original sex, drugs, and rock and roll, like right after the Stones, they kind of, they are the like model of that like kind of hard rock, tearing through the land band that we had for all these years. And like, I'm not saying that's good, bad, whatever, but that's what they were. Like that was the thing that you knew about Led Zeppelin was like their, unbelievable excesses and all the crazy stories and it doesn't have to be like celebrating that, but this movie would have you believe that like all they ever did was pick up a guitar and play, and then they just like took a nap. I mean, it's so sanitized. I don't understand why that is. Like, who is this for? It's not on Disney.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, funny anecdotes from the road. Like all of their memories of each other are so cliched.
Yeah.
It's they're like best men speeches that can't get farther than I love this guy, he's the greatest guy, don't we all just love this guy, like,
yeah, right, like you just really never met.
Yeah.
Okay, and
but also it's there is something less than that. It's like there's no verve, there's no like
there's no sense of urgency or tension.
There's no sense of urgency or excitement. No one like leans forward and like, oh, I've been waiting for a moment to say this. Like there is nothing.
No,
like, there's no like flicker of inspiration where you're like, oh, I can tell that the filmmaker was delighted when he had this, and then felt like he had a section that he could build around because he had this nugget. It's like it's all just stuff. It's a history book,
Yeah. It's there's no setting the record straight. There's no whatever. Like
there's no laughs. There's no times. There's
nothing. It's wild. It's wild. It really is like a knockoff Chipotle bowl where it's like we have the restored footage, we have the interviews, we have the interview from the guy that's dead that you're hearing for the first time,
right?
And we've got whatever, and we've got some footage of of them growing up, like of bands that they liked when they were young.
Yeah, and it looks like maybe there was like some money. If there's anything,
it doesn't look cheap.
It doesn't look cheap. I was going to say that it looks like there's been some money put into like film restoration. That the footage, the old never before seen footage that they have looks good.
Yeah,
and that is maybe the strength of the movie.
Yeah,
some of those performances are like. If somebody sent me a YouTube flip video of any one of those extended performances, I would watch it and be like, "This is badass." I just wouldn't be. In my wildest dreams, I wouldn't imagine the rest of the movie they decided to put around those.
Yeah, and that's not. I don't know that that's like the director's. Like I think it's competently well done. Like it's all well done, but there's just like I think that they just didn't have anything, and it's just like we've assembled this set of parts together. Yeah. And it's a movie, and it's going to make money and whatever. And
it's like 100 Hollywood movies you've seen where it's like the screenplay's not terrible. It's directed competently. I don't hate any of the actors in it. It's none of their best performances, but they also aren't making a fool of themselves. And then you forget about the movie an hour and a half after seeing it, like airplane fare type stuff.
It's like when you read now, like in 2025, like, hey, this band is putting out a new greatest hits album.
Yeah.
They found an unreleased track, It's like, are we still doing this? Like, really? Come on. Who are we kidding here?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if I were to gather just from the way the movie uses it, I think the Bonham interview is what they think is the real like ace up their sleeve. That they, he gave so few interviews. Here's one that where he spoke at length. And he spoke at length about their early days, the ostensible subject of the movie. He spoke at length about the other guys. And it's like the director has this idea that he's going to play the interview for the other three members.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll concede, at the very first moment, the very first time that we watch Robert Plant on camera, I actually don't know if the first one is Robert Plant or Jimmy Page, but the very first moment where we see somebody just listening to Bonham speak,
mm-hmm.
and he smiles a little bit, I was like, okay, this will be nice.
It's a human moment.
This is a human moment. And then they just replay that moment like 9 more times.
Right.
And frankly, none of those Bonham interview clips are all that good. There's just not much in that interview. And if that's the ace up your sleeve, it's ugh.
I mean, I don't know that I've ever heard John Bonham's voice. Maybe like occasionally like a word here or there, like in Song Remains the Same or something, maybe. But like, I was like, oh my God, John Bonham, what is he going to say? And like, unfortunately, not his fault. Like, he wasn't planning for this to be the subject of 50 years later, like a documentary. Like, it just is kind of anodyne. And really, there's probably only 3 minutes of it in the whole movie.
There isn't much of it either, also. Yeah.
And I don't know if they cut a lot out or that's just what illustrated the movie, but it's not much to hang a movie on.
No.
The other interviews are just very, I don't know. I mean
it's like they're fine. Like,
yeah,
some of the early history about like what Jimmy Page was thinking about when he was moving from being a session player to working with the Yardbirds, then broke up almost immediately, and this like in between time before he put the Yardbirds back together as Zeppelin. Like, it's more detailed probably than I have heard about those things. I know you are a bigger Zeppelin fan than I am and have read Jimmy Page's book, so it's possible that stuff wasn't even remotely new to you. It was like more color. It fills in the lines a little bit more than the basic story I was just aware of from a lifetime of association with classic rock. But it's still not great. It's just like a little bit more color on the page.
All right. Let's go through it. I mean, first of all, look, if this is the first time you've ever like seen a music documentary, a rock documentary, or like paying attention to classic rock bands from England or whatever, like this may be new to you, and it's going to be new to somebody. And that's fine. Like, I may, throw this on for my 17-year-old nephew or 15-year-old nephew or whatever, and the idea, like the broad strokes of the story are new to them, so that's interesting. But for me, just I'm the guy sitting watching this movie, having read about this stuff and watched 10,000 documentaries and whatever my whole life. This is so by the numbers of like, did you know that England was bombed out after the war and there was rationing, but yet it was also kind of a hopeful place. And then did you know that U.S. servicemen and merchant marines brought records over of early rock and roll because the music that was on the radio in Britain in the 50s was just terrible, and all of a sudden we heard this like unbelievable sound, and it changed our life. Like, it's like you or I could have written this whole narrative, like in our sleep in 5 minutes, and it would have been verbatim what we see.
Yeah, it is. I now all I'll say in defense of it is it's pretty short. They get through it pretty quick.
I guess so.
And then,
I mean, we see like there's also a few weird things, like they're playing the song Train Kept a Rollin', and then we see a clip of Elvis, and that's the kind of thing that always makes me feel like, did they just not want to pay for the actual Elvis sound? You know what I mean? Like, there's always those kind of things where it's like you see the Beatles walking off the plane, but then you don't actually hear the Beatles. And it's like, but it's like, this is a documentary about Led Zeppelin. You think they could just pay for whatever. There's a little weird, quirky things like that.
Yes.
Skiffle. We get into Skiffle, which
second Skiffle appearance improbably on the Rock Docs podcast.
Canonically, I don't believe I'm a Skiffle truther. There's no such thing as Skiffle. It never existed. This whole thing is made up by British people to make us look stupid.
Yeah.
But allegedly they were involved in the Skiffle scene. I mean, there's a cute bit of like Jimmy Page watching the video from 1958 of him as like a little teenager, like playing on British TV in a skiffle band. I've seen that video, but
Yeah,
you know,
the video that it's in, it might get loud.
yeah, right, exactly. So I'm sure he's seen it before. It's not like,
Right.
oh my god, I've never
Right.
seen this.
Like I've seen it. If I've seen it, he's seen it.
Yeah. And it's not like in the Summer of Soul doc, Questlove does that so well, where he shows people clips of this like that nobody ever knew existed of this, So it's like the fifth dimension and them like watching themselves, and like there's really great scenes like that. And here it's like, oh, that's me watching the video that I've probably seen 50,000 times. Like it's cute, it's cool. I'm gonna smile, but whatever.
He smiles. He quietly smiles in a, I don't know, maybe polite way. I don't know how much he certainly is not having the genuine emotion that Fifth Dimension had when they're watching, the Harlem concerts.
Yeah, and you get John Paul Jones talking about how his parents were in vaudeville, and the story about how he at 14 or something became like the organist and choir master for a church, and he wasn't even into like the religion. He just like he wanted a gig.
Like he improvises the hymns.
Right. He can't really read music very well, so he just it just kind of jams on it. That was good. I probably had heard some of that stuff before, but like hearing him tell the story, and having a little feature of him, because like usually it's the Page and Plant show.
Yeah, I mean John Paul Jones is very likable in this movie. Real sweet guy, smart guy. He tells his stories. That is a highlight I have for here. For one, it's a unique origin story. Usually the popular musician who comes by way of the church does it as like a singer, right?
Right.
Not the organ,
not the choir master.
Choir master. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's so John Paul Jones. Like he's a composer. He's like he has that. I don't know how well of a trained musician he is, but he has those kind of skills that like can fill in around the the riffs and stuff that Jimmy was doing it. And when he worked with REM and other stuff, like he's done some cool stuff.
When they have this sort of structure at the beginning where it's sort of like 4 tributaries. We're starting at the far upstream, and we're patiently walking down them until they're going to converge into a single river.
Mm-hmm.
And it's patient. I'll say that. Another word would maybe be slow, kind of boring, frankly. Some of these early stories don't earn their screen time, I guess I would say, and the filmmaking doesn't give them any momentum. It's not like a similar structure is in History of the Eagles when we start with Don and Glenn in Texas and Detroit respectively, and like those sections have a propulsion to them. It feels like you're racing to the moment that you're going to get together. Here I'm not racing, I'm waiting.
Well, those sections create a sense of place.
Yeah.
Especially with the Glenn Fry bits, you get like I mean, for both cases, you get Bob Seger and you get Kenny Rogers. Like you get other voices coming in to like set the scene and whatever. And like maybe this movie would have been better or more interesting if they had brought in like some guy that was the session, whatever cello player that played with Jimmy Page. Like something like that would actually kind of be interesting. Like, okay,
what type of player was he like among other skiffle players?
Or the session,
session guys,
because Jimmy Page has this whole great career as a session musician in the '60s, like plays on all these big hits, and like, but he just was a working musician. Like he would do music, he would do anything,
right?
And they'd call him, and be like, "Hey, bring your guitar, come down to the studio. We're paying you whatever, however many quid an hour," and that was his job. So like he played on every kind of music you can think of, and like. You don't really get a sense of what that's like. And again, like I would love to hear from other people that were his peers who didn't become huge rock stars.
Yeah.
Like, was he actually like considered to be the top guy? Was he like, oh, I never really would have expected him to be such a big star. Was he quiet? Was he, I don't know, like some kind of color would have been interesting. Same thing with John Paul Jones.
Even like how, we talk about the part that they have with him being interested in this music that's coming over these merchant marines, that tired story. But then during the period where he's working as a session musician, where John Paul Jones is also working as a session musician, popular music is happening in London at that time. And we don't really get anything about that in here. We're like, when we discover like the Yardbirds, it's like, Yeah, London had started to kind of ignore the Yardbirds.
Yeah, that is very weird. The Beatles and the Stones, I do not think are mentioned in this
I
documentary.
don't think they're mentioned.
Which is really weird. Like, you'd think at least the Rolling Stones, who are clearly like kind of the model for this kind of band, would be mentioned. And like, the Kinks, like none of these, it's really weird that none of that like is mentioned. Or Cream, which is clearly a predecessor for,
right.
Like, and they all knew each other and like whatever. Like, it's, very weird.
If all you knew was this movie, you would think that the Yardbirds were just like kind of this weird local band that like had a very, very little bit of like success just in terms of like being able to book gigs. And so that was a job that Jimmy could get. Like, he like describes Jeff Beck and Eric Clapton. He just calls them like Jeff and Eric,
Yeah, that's fine. I mean,
that stuff's fine, but there's, I mean, maybe it's commendable. Maybe we would be taking a shit on them if they were doing another tired trip through the early days of British rock and roll.
But find another way to. That's what, like, this has to be an interesting story.
Yeah, it does have
to be. What is life like as a session musician in the 60s in England? Like, we always hear this, but they never really get into it. Like, I feel like I know a lot more about the Wrecking Crew or like the Muscle Shoals guys.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? They have their own documentaries, and and we've just heard a lot about them. But like, you hear like Jimmy Page and John Paul Jones are session musicians, and like some other famous rock guys like pop in and out, and you just don't know what is that really like. Like, what, are they hard drinking? Are they like, is everybody basically pretty straight laced? It's like everybody's wearing suits and, like the early days of the Beatles. Like, what is it like? What is the deal when all this like explosion of early rock music is happening?
Right.
The Mersey Beat, the Beatles, the Stones, this, that, and the other. Like, what is the reaction in that community as their jobs are changing and the expectations are changing? This is not the movie that tells you that.
No.
I'm not blaming it for not being a different movie. I'm just blaming it for not being as good of a version of this movie as it could be.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just make whatever story you decide to tell, make it fun, interesting.
Yeah, I guess I'm not
revealing. This doesn't reveal anything about these moments. It just kind of recites them.
Yeah, it's very Wikipedia. Yeah, I guess I'm now soft pitching the like British London version of the Wrecking Crew movie, which probably would be really good.
Yeah,
maybe.
Totally.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd watch that. Hey,
yeah.
So we get that, and then you get the like kind of other pieces, like these northern blokes.
Yeah.
Bonham, which we just don't hear a lot about Bonham because, like, for some reason the movie is like the only voices you're going to hear are these guys, and you get a little bit of Bonham, but not very much. So his story is just kind of not really told,
right?
Which is sort of weird.
Yeah, I mean, we learn, that he was linked up with Plant early. That was they were connected in these early bands.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like it was a very comfortable or successful life. There were
Band of Joy,
stealing gasoline and with Bonham freezing in the back seat of their cars while they're stuff like that. And it's not uninteresting, but it's for one, it, like, again, very short. It's not even a long section, these stories.
Yeah. I do feel like a documentary about Robert Plant that just focused on him would be very interesting because he's very well spoken.
He is.
And like the story of Led Zeppelin it's ultimately the story of Jimmy Page.
Yeah.
He's the architect and this is his story and everybody else is,
This movie makes that clear to its credit.
Yeah, and that's fine. And I'm not like, I don't think even Robert Plant would disagree with that. I just feel like Robert Plant is an interesting dude. He's certainly gone on to do more interesting stuff publicly than any of the other, than Jimmy Page or John Paul Jones. Like, he's still out there doing cool stuff.
Yeah.
Which is like very, like, in terms of people of his era who, like, I still think are like bringing something to the table. It's not that many, there's Bob Dylan and him and a few other people,
Yeah. He wells up a few times. He seems a little bit more like prepared to be emotional than maybe Jimmy does.
Yeah, he's just like a real dude. Jimmy Page, like, you do not see behind the mask ever.
Right.
And I don't know. Considering how much of a freak that dude is, not particularly in good ways. So, okay. Yeah. And like to the extent you hear Bonham, he comes off like kind of a sweet
guy.
quiet
Yeah,
guy. I mean,
quiet guy.
the story that I understand, or the like narrative that has taken hold after all these years of Bonham being this wild man, is basically that like he was a homebody, he missed his wife and kids, and he like had to he drank and did everything to cope, and ultimately he was tight with Plant, and but Plant was like also just a wild, crazy party guy, and especially after his son dies, and eventually was the end of John Bonham. And that if he had just stayed home, he would have had a happy. He's like, it's not the story of like Bob Dylan could never have stayed home. You know what I mean? That was not in the cards for him. It was never going to do that. But Bonham, like it's almost like it's almost like a shame that he like became got caught up in that lifestyle and just didn't. He could have had a happy life at home, and so I mean, obviously you don't really get that in this movie because it's just like a little bit of narration of him, and it doesn't get into that, doesn't go that far. So you talk about him, he talks, there's a little talk about him like having to kind of be talked into leaving, and then he's off, and that's the story doesn't go beyond that. So it's just very weird to me.
Yeah. His wife was never going to let him be in a band with Robert Plant again, but she did, and there's no insight into how that mind was changed, or
right,
why she saw this as a different opportunity. It just seems a lot of it is like half told wedding stories, basically.
Yeah,
or funeral stories, I guess.
Yeah. All right. So
they join. They become a band. They they sort of take on this this U.S. tour,
right,
that is available to them. And
wait. First, we gotta they get together.
Yeah.
And they it's so weird. I can never get a handle on this. Like the Yardbirds were like a successful act that had like some big hit singles and things like that.
Yeah.
And then like when the other guys leave, Peter Grant, their manager, who boy, I wish we'd make a documentary about that guy.
Totally.
He gets Jimmy to like kind of put together a new Yardbirds, with him and the other, which ends up being this group. And I don't even know in this movie if they even say that they were the new Yardbirds.
There's a newspaper clipping that they show that says the Yardbirds now playing as Led Zeppelin.
Right. Okay.
Is how the show was.
Right. So, and they all get together, and the first time they ever meet, the four of them together, is like in this basement, like below a dentist's office or something, which sounds terrible to be like in the dentist chair in 1968, like getting ethered or whatever, and like proto Led Zeppelin is practicing right 10 feet below you. It does not sound like a pleasant way to get your root canal or whatever. But they get together, and again, it's like it seems like they would have been able to afford like a real studio or something. I don't know. And I love how the whole thing is just so casual, like, oh, do you know any bass players? Like, oh yeah, how about John? It's always like it's always so weird to me that it's not like, let's make a list of the 20 bass players and like go down the list and do put this up on the whiteboard. You know what I mean? It's so like casual.
You're always amazed that the rock stars of that have made this thing are not like you.
Yeah, why are they like me?
They wouldn't do it the way you do it.
There would be a PowerPoint presentation. There would be spreadsheets.
Yeah,
come on. I would hire Bain Consulting or PwC or somebody to come in and square things away.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no.
Although in this case they do start with another singer, and this other singer recommends Plant.
Right. Terry Jacks. Yeah, and then they have to. Is he the Seasons in the Sun guy? I think he's the Seasons in the Sun.
Is that who it is?
I think so.
Yeah. And then they have to outbid Bonham's band to bring him in.
40 quid.
40 quid a week. Yeah.
They scrape it together. Yeah. John Paul Jones has a little chuckle at that. I do. I feel like maybe Jimmy Page is the problem with this movie. I don't know. Maybe so. Because really, whenever John Jones or Robert Plant comes on the screen, I'm engaged.
I kind of am too. I think that might actually be true. I think they just put a lot of stock in, and I know I think they put a lot of stock in like, hey, we've got this interview with Bonham.
Yeah.
Like he's not going to be absent from the movie. We're going to be able to use it. And, then the director's thinking like, also, man, what a nice little gift it'll be to have the guys listening to Bonham talk. And it's, that's just, unfortunately, that dog don't hunt.
All right. So, then we get, how many more times? This is the first extended musical.
You're blown right by the return to it from another 3-time champion.
Right. Yes.
Well, Glyn Johns.
Glyn Johns. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You're right. They're recording with Glyn Johns.
Yes.
Our friend. Always happy to see our buddy Glyn.
Yes. There's the second time I've mentioned the Eagles now, but with Glyn Johns, I do think it's funny that, in the history of the Eagles, when they're paired with Glyn Johns as the producer for their first records, they make great hay of the fact that he was so unimpressed by them because he's just coming off of recording with Led Zeppelin. And he just like couldn't be less impressed by them as musicians.
Yeah.
Yet like the parallels, setting aside the style of music, they are kind of sort of a super group, right? They're sort of assembled together.
Yeah.
And assembled together with enough credibility that the industry's like, okay, yeah, definitely. You definitely get to do this.
You got a shot.
Yeah, now that you've gotten together, you don't need to like grind away to dust in clubs. You like, we're going to put you together in a real studio with a real producer, and you're going to record some music.
Right.
Which, puts them in like the 1% of bands in the history of existence, just like that. Right. They also then get like sent away to go play together. In the Eagles case, they go to.
Okay. Good. Continue.
Right.
I see where you're going. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So they go to Aspen for the Eagles. Yep. In this case, they go to Scandinavia for Led Zeppelin, and so I don't know. It's
We know from the Eagles documentary that Glyn Johns was not impressed by the Eagles, but we don't know if he was impressed by Led Zeppelin. Maybe he's like, these guys suck. Go to California. Wait, these guys suck too. And meanwhile, he's producing the 2 biggest bands of all time. After the Beatles, who he had just been the engineer for.
I mean, you could imagine him having some sort of crisis where he's just like, dude, every band they send me sucks. And is it possible that I'm doomed after having produced the Beatles to just have an unsatisfying life for the next 50 years, which you could forgive him for feeling that way.
All right. So this happens a few times during the movie, but I think the first time I really noticed it or clocked it happening was in this 1968 when they're first getting together, whatever, is that the movie quickly, as there's some music playing, does a montage of what's happening in the world at that time.
Yes.
And boy, it is really wild. Like the one that I wrote down from 1968 is like, it's like Equatorial Guinea achieves independence from Spain.
I know.
I paused the film at that point. I'm like, wait.
I was laughing at it too because it's
draw the line here.
That montage is such a trope in American cinema.
Yeah.
Right. Like think about like, I don't know, like the opening scene of The Watchmen or something like that.
Yeah.
And in those cases, it's like the assassinations. It's Chicago, stuff like that. Here we get like Mexico City military opens fire on protesters. Equatorial Guinea achieves independence. It's because they're not in America, they take the whole world was crazy at this moment.
Right. Yeah.
They really have decided to talk about the whole world.
Yeah. My kid likes this series of books that's like, who is, and it could be like whoever, who is Shaquille O'Neal, who is like Amelia Earhart, whatever. And like at the very back of the book, like the back cover page, like whatever, it's like, it'll be like a timeline and it'll like mention things that are mentioned in the story, but then also have other things, but they're completely every single time I look at this book, I'm like, what? It'll be like, November 1963, Kennedy killed. January 1964, the automatic peanut sheller is invented. Like completely insane. Like what did that have to do with it? And that's how I felt watching these montages. Like how did were they really clocked in on the Equatorial Guinea independence movement?
It's like, possible that they were like this thing is hack unless it only includes the moments that were happening literally at this time. So it's you get like You just end up getting like municipal politics, like mayor proposes budget. Like, like not even an exceptional one.
Exactly. I wonder if the director is like, we can get them to react to these things to talk about the times. Like, so John Paul Jones, what was your thought about the Equatorial Guinea independence? He's like, what?
Right.
This interview's over. So yeah, that was wild. Okay. Then
I do like this section where they go to New York and they sort of like they have the completed album basically.
Yeah, this was good because they're talking about the money little bit, and
we like that.
Yeah,
Plant says that Peter was looking like a mafia don.
Yeah, he just talks about how he liked Atlantic Records, like the great record label. He met with Jerry Wexler. And like basically, that he knew enough because he was, a studio cat to like basically pay for the recording of the album and then just be like, here is this album. Do you want to buy it? Do you want to pay for it and distribute it and make a lot of money? And it's refreshing in a rock doc to not see the band getting ripped off.
Right. Well, yeah, and he also has the sense to acknowledge like that a crucial part here is you need to know how to produce your own album, and he did. He knew enough based on his session work to know how to do it.
Yeah,
he actually even does some innovative stuff in the studio, even on those first tracks.
Oh yeah, I mean clearly the guy is a studio rat.
Totally. Yeah,
yeah. That's another thing I wonder about Jimmy Page. Like, all right, dude was a studio rat for the whole '60s. That was his life, and then he did Led Zeppelin and he produced all the albums and he, whatever, came up with all the songs, whatever else. And then like he did a few other things after that. Like I know he did like The Firm and whatever. But like, was he just like, I'm not going to the studio? Like, it's not like you hear like, oh, Jimmy Page is in a studio, like recording an album or like playing guitar on something. Like, is he just like, I did that and I'm walking away?
Yeah.
Like Emmett Smith, like hand the ball and just walk off. Like I'm good, like kind of interesting. Like how do you go from being that much of a studio rat to like then just never making anything again?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Good question.
Anyway, guy's a mystery. They should do a documentary about him. Okay. All right. So they don't get ripped off. They go to America, and they kick ass. Basically, is the bottom line.
Although, and this maybe goes to the point we've been making a few times, but. Like before the Filmore West, like they play a few shows and it's before their Filmore West show that I think Peter says, if you don't break through here, it's pretty much over. It's like, why? Why? What? You've just cut an album by all counts. Like you guys were like funding them when they hadn't recorded any music. Now they've played less than 10 shows, and this is like the make or break moment that just
like
seems
totally. I don't think they've played one show in England.
Right.
Like give them a fair shot.
Seems very contrived stakes.
What
here.
the pressure? Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to go on a limb and say that that's not true. This was they actually were not at a do or die moment when they finally broke through with Filmore West.
Yeah, it's like my kid in the front yard. Like every shot is the buzzer beater. Right. Game 7 of the NBA Finals.
Oh, but there was a clock malfunction, so there's another second left.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So maybe that was a little overstated. So okay, but they kicked ass. Right. I mean, all the live footage in this movie is awesome. Some of it's been seen before, some of it's new to me. I don't know if it's out there somewhere else, but it looks and sounds incredible. And
the crowd shots, it's just like see
everybody looks cool.
Everybody looks cool. The bill was Country Joe and the Fish and Taj Mahal.
Yeah,
you ever see Taj Mahal?
I have seen Taj Mahal.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah,
I've not seen Country Joe and the Fish, but.
No.
Is Country Joe still around?
I kind of get the sense that maybe he is still around.
Can I get a number crunch on this?
Let's get a number.
Country Joe McDonald, right?
Yeah, let's see.
Country Joe and the Fish, you don't hear that much about anymore.
No, it's interesting actually reading contemporary books from the time because they were like so treated as one of the most important bands of the time.
And played at Woodstock?
And like it just doesn't have any lasting power. Inherent Vice is a big Country Joe and the Fish. Moment.
I kind of feel like when I was a young person coming up, like Country Joe and the Fish kind of became like the punchline.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like almost like, oh, who was the best band at Woodstock? Was it The Who? Was it Jimi Hendrix or was it Country Joe and the Fish? Like that was the joke part, but like, come on. show some respect to Country Joe and the Fish.
Yeah.
Okay.
He is still alive. Yes.
And when they toured the U.S., they toured it with Vanilla Fudge,
Right.
another kick-ass band.
Totally.
Shout out to Vanilla Fudge. Apparently, John Bonham and Carmine Appice, two drummers, hit it off. And it's like they were like two peas in a pod. They hit it off great, and then you never hear anything else about it again. It's like, give me an anecdote.
Yeah.
What did these two guys do? They're famous drummers.
The anecdote is like he would watch him play drums, and then he'd watch him play drums.
yes, exactly.
There had to be more to it than that,
which comes back with the James Brown band.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Later
James Brown band would come out and watch him play drums. Like,
yeah,
me too. That's also what I did.
There's a great the video of Plant being interviewed by Wolfman Jack and taking calls is great.
Yeah,
that is great.
That is very funny.
This girl calls up and says, "You're such a fox," and he says, "What's that?" He's never heard that term before.
Yeah, it's like an American slang, I guess.
Yeah, and he was like, he'd been in America for a week. He would not have heard it. Right. And, he's just like kind of blushing. You know what I mean? He doesn't quite know how to handle this attention. And it's so charming.
Yeah.
And so like, it's great.
That whole section is great. That's like that actually
that's the best part of the movie.
That actually is a nugget that they have here. Where it's like, oh man, listen to this old radio recording, and they show
it's videoed.
It's video, excuse me. Yeah, and then they also layer it on top of like footage of just like the streets of those cities at the time.
Yeah, yeah. So very Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah, it is.
So that's great. Yeah, love that. Then we kind of run out of steam.
Yeah, their concert in Middle Earth, that looks like maybe the worst venue I've ever seen. That looks like a sound stage and then seating that's like straight vertical with a bunch of kids that are like closing their ears.
Oh yeah, right. That's when they're playing Communication Breakdown.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, it's like little kids and like middle class adults who look like they're like on their lunch break.
Yeah, it's just like a very funny throwback to like no one knew what music was supposed to be yet, really.
Right. Like the rock band touring industry had not
been created,
really been figured out.
Yeah.
And I mean, there was enough going on that they could go on the US and do a touring route that makes sense.
Yes.
But that had just kind of been invented.
Right. And a lot of those shows were probably being played at like movie theaters and stuff.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Right. Yeah. The college hall, whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Then there's a part where, what was it? It was that first festival they played in England where you see the live footage, but I guess it's silent. They only have film,
which I think is the case a couple times in this movie.
Yeah.
And
this one I noticed because I'm like, this is the studio version of Whole Lotta Love, and it goes on for a long time as though you're watching them play it, but it's just it's not synced up, and that's very weird to me. Like it's one thing if they have to do that for a few seconds to like make the transition work, but like it goes on way too long.
I actually had the thought because I was like, this. Like, what are they using here? It wasn't even a Whole Lot of Love. It was, and so I was Shazamming to see if they would like pick up the recording specifically. Yeah. And the Communication Breakdown is like a BBC Sessions.
Oh yeah, okay.
So is I Can't Quit You, Baby.
Right.
So I don't, I don't want to put too much stock in Shazam's ability to differentiate between recordings, but it did instantly identify them as something other than what we were told they were.
Yeah, and again, these bits go on for longer than they need to, so it becomes obvious. They don't if they only did that for a short period of time, they could pass it off.
But you're like, no, that's the fourth time Plant has been singing, and it's not that part.
Right? Yeah. Clearly, this is not working.
Yeah. But those long sections are like, I mean, except for the one where it's a Whole Lot of Love is just like the studio session. Yeah. The other ones are, it's great footage. It's cool.
They look cool.
I'm not having a bad time during any of those parts.
No. I mean, they all look cool as hell.
I'm listening to Led Zeppelin. It's fine. It's completely fine.
Like, where do you buy your clothes? You're Robert Plant. It's 1968. Like, give me something.
Yeah.
How did you decide this is gonna be your stage look?
Yeah. What was the little economy and whatever?
When you come to America the first time?
Yeah.
What What
did you like about LA? What was cool about, like they're playing shows in like like their first shows in Denver?
Yeah.
Talk to me about Denver.
Yeah.
Like,
What's going on there?
You're playing your first show for some reason in Denver, Colorado, as these British guys who are not famous. Say something about that.
When you
had to have been a curiosity. You had to have been a curiosity, right?
When you get to Los Angeles,
yeah.
Did the guys in the band say to each other, "Do you ever eat burritos?"
Right, right.
Yeah.
When you're after the Filmore West, are you mixing it up with any of the San Francisco guys that were crawling within that universe at that time, and very easily could have been at the show or around afterwards, or the day before or the day after? Like stories.
Yeah,
bring this thing to life for me.
Right, like we don't have to get super salacious about Jimmy Page lining up 14-year-olds, whatever. Okay, we know that is on the record. You know what I mean? But there has to be some interesting things that happen on the road.
Yeah,
it's amazing that they just funny things that happen, whatever.
Yeah,
and they just avoid it because I think they just don't want to rehash all the salacious stuff that everybody knows.
Well, so my thought, returning to what I said at the top, I often find myself in these movies to defend myself from authorized documentaries, because I guess I just we all know, I don't really find a journalistic obligation from the filmmakers to explore things that people don't want to explore, and if that's just not what the movie's interested in, then so be it. It can be an interesting movie in a different way. And there are plenty of other places where people do have journalistic obligations. Here, I think this movie does reveal a bigger problem with the authorized movie, which is not that it lacks credibility, or not that it lacks honesty, but that it just lacks purpose. That it just has no reason to be, and no one is around in it. It's no one's most important project.
Right.
There's nothing about this that is going to make somebody weep if it goes badly.
Yeah, so I haven't seen, but Bernard MacMahon, our director, who I'm not hanging any of that's on him, so
it's professionally made. It is well made.
MacMahon, you're welcome to come on and talk shit about us all you want.
Tell us.
Tell us
6 different directions about why we're idiots that don't understand what's going on.
He made this documentary series 10 years ago called American Epic, which I've not seen, but it's about the history of roots music in the U.S. and it's the Carter family and Blind Willie Johnson and guys like that. And supposedly Robert Plant, I think I'm getting this right, was a fan of that documentary series. He loved it. So he's like, all right, if we're going to do a Led Zeppelin documentary, I want this guy, because this guy connects with and really loves the music that I love. Obviously we know Robert Plant is deeply into that kind of American roots music. And so I think that was the connection that got this guy the job.
Mm-hmm.
And, great job, great gig for the guy. Hey, whatever. No, that's great. But that, a movie doesn't, I'm not romantic about it that a movie has to be somebody's passion project.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can make a perfectly good movie based on the fact that this sounded cool and I'm a working director and this is my job, nothing wrong with that. So it's totally fine. But it does seem like the party who was most passionate about making this movie was the person who was going to get the check at the end of the
production company who wanted a finished product to send out. Yeah.
Atlantic Records, Warner Bros. Records, whoever that is, etc. Somebody was gonna, needed to make a quarterly, profit, and this was, going to be a big part.
It also it had a sense to me of like a post Get Back project where somebody's like, all right, well, what do we have here? And I looked into it, and its creation timeline begins before that. So it is not. It certainly is not an idea born
cash grab.
It's certainly not an idea born after somebody saw Get Back and was like, "Shit, dude, we could do it. We could do one of these." But it just I don't know. It's a very lifeless movie, considering it's again worth saying a few times. It's about Led Zeppelin,
right? Yeah, they're awesome.
Yeah,
a great band with great music. Every note of music that they play in this
No one's ever said
thing is
like
great.
I know I run into a lot of people who dislike Led Zeppelin.
Sure.
A fair amount. That's like a kind of hipstery take these days often. Right? Like mostly just classic rock hate, I guess. No one says they're boring. No one thinks that they're a boring band, right? It's like they might be grating in certain ways or overwrought, but certainly not boring.
Yeah.
And this movie is just kind of dull, honestly.
Yeah. It has the feel of like stories that are just been told too many times and they can't get it up to make it seem fresh. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then so finally there's this weird attempt to like put a button on it where like they played their first show on some date. Their first show in England was on some date. And then that exact same date, and it was like some club or whatever. And that exact same date a year later is when they're playing the Royal Albert Hall.
Yeah.
After the second album comes out. And I mean, there's some stuff in between about the second album recording it and like how Robert started writing some of the lyrics.
Right.
All that is very lightly
and
dressed.
Again, it's like not very insightful into his songwriting process. I mean, it's not. I don't come away with it with like added appreciation for the music, for his lyrics. I'm just like, I know, ramble on.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, working with Jimmy and the amazing sounds inspired this music to come out of me. So I wrote something that talked about some characters from the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Like, exactly. All right, cool. It's a great song, but it's not, like I never listened to the lyrics and was like, wow, man, this is heavy,
Right. It's less insightful than like your typical episode of Song Exploder. Or,
Yes. Oh yeah, absolutely. So we get that, and then they just keep getting bigger and better, and then they play the show in the Royal Albert Hall, which is the 1 year anniversary or whatever of their first show in Britain, and John Paul Jones talks about how his dad came to see the Royal Albert Hall show, and he was so proud of him.
Yeah,
that's a nice moment.
It's a nice moment. He sees him sitting there, like all chuffed.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and his dad was an old vaudevillian,
right?
And his both his parents were.
I like his dad's advice when he says that he wants to pick up the bass. He's like, bass is a novelty instrument. Pick up a saxophone, and you will never suffer for lack of it.
I love that.
It's like
that is great. Electric bass is a novelty instrument.
Electric bass, yes, right. Important distinction. Yeah, electric bass is a novelty instrument. I just love any sort of like old timey entertainment industry wisdom. Whenever somebody in something resembling the modern entertainment industry like had a parent who was like, on the Borscht Belt performer on vaudeville or or like, like my grandparents were like in the carnival or something like that.
Yeah.
Anything that's like there was a little bit of wisdom handed down in my family about how to be somebody who performs in front of other people. It's like it's very funny. It's never great advice, but it is always interesting to me.
Yeah, it isn't. It's definitely interesting, but I cannot. Yeah, I paused the video there, and I just sat there thinking, like, what does that mean that the electric bass? Okay, I understand the electric bass guitar, like the Fender electric bass, had only recently been invented.
Yeah,
in the 1950, whatever 58,
probably
whatever this is.
Right? Yeah,
yeah, but like how. Like, is he thinking of like Flea slapping away on the bass, like, or like, is he imagining Les Claypool?
Yeah, who did he see playing in such a way that he was like, that is ridiculous? Because now I concede, if you saw Flea in 1950,
you saw Les Claypool,
you'd be like, no one will pay to hear that. Once that's been done a handful of times, no one will want to see that again.
This instrument is going out of production.
Again, I gotta head off any angry emails. I love Primus, but ride with me on this.
Yeah, thing. Yeah. I hear what you're saying from the perspective of a vaudevillian bloke in 1958. You might not see the appeal of sailing the seas of cheese.
Yeah, totally.
So, all right. I don't know. Bad advice from Mr. Paul Jones, but senior. But I'm glad he was proud to see
Paul Jones, his all his stories about his family are pretty good, actually. He seems like a well-adjusted, happy guy. You know, I like all his screen time.
Yeah.
One thing I can say is that when they're doing the map of the U.S. tour, where they go to every city,
famous map,
and they have the concert, the ticket stubs come up and show.
Sure.
They actually put Columbia, Maryland, on the map. Not
your hometown,
not Baltimore, Maryland, but they actually
what's the venue in Columbia where they play?
Merriweather Post.
Oh, at Merriweather Post. Okay, right. Yeah, right. Okay,
but that is almost always going to just be listed.
It's going to be Baltimore,
right?
Right. It's like
Chula Vista here.
Yeah, we're playing in Boston. Well, it's actually Foxborough. Whatever. Okay, sure. I mean, yeah, exactly. Like Chula Vista.
Yeah. But here they actually put Columbia, which I'm sure somebody else, particularly anybody who's not from Maryland, would look then be like, "The hell is that city?" Like after DC and before New York or before Philly.
There you go.
So,
wonder who
I'll be going to see a show at Merriweather Post Pavilion this very weekend.
Wow.
So
goose or fish?
It's unimportant what the answer to that question is.
Is it goose or fish?
It's goose.
Okay, good.
Among other bands, String Cheese Incident, J-Rad, Dogs in a Pile, Eggy.
So it's some sort of festival situation is what you're describing to me.
Yes, the All Good Festival, All Good Now, which I used to go to the All Good Festival back when it was in Western Maryland in the early 2000s. It has been dormant for a little over a decade. They've brought it back. Somebody saw the ability to make some money. I'll be there.
Much like the Led Zeppelin documentary. Somebody saw the opportunity to make some money.
Yes.
All right. Well, I think we've character assassinated this documentary enough.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think probably I would be actually, I wish I had checked out some Reddit boards. I wouldn't be surprised if some Led Zeppelin fans actually have a stronger opinion on this as opposed to a worse one, because at least you get some footage and stuff that they've probably never seen. They're probably just like, I'm just glad we have that.
I mean,
movie's not good, but at least we have that.
Rolling Stone said it was. Wait, I'm going to get the exact word. I thought that's what it was, but I was like, that cannot be possibly what they said. They said it was revelatory. Revelatory.
Yeah, what was revealed? What was revealed?
Name one thing that was revealed that we did not already know. Yeah. There's nothing. That John Bonham and Carmine Appice, the drummer from Vanilla Fudge, we're both drummers.
We're both
on the same tour, and they were friendly. Like, what could possibly be like?
Revelatory.
I guess you could maybe say some of the footage that had not previously been seen,
is
good, and like it's cool to see it. I don't know that I would say revelatory.
No,
nothing is revealed. Not one thing. The entire movie.
No, but I understand if you're a big fan and you just like welcome the release of more old footage. I get that, but that doesn't warrant the use of the word revelatory.
Yeah, it's just a factor of like back in the day, if they discovered this footage in like John Bonham's interview, that would have just been like stuff that they put on the DVD box set or the whatever, the CD box set. But since that stuff doesn't sell anymore, now that has to become a documentary. Yeah. So they have this stuff and they can make it into a documentary. And sometimes you get back and that's great. And sometimes you get this and it's less great. And,
I do think that this is a low mark in our, at least in the realm of like creative inspiration in our current moment of streaming produced rock docs.
This really did make me feel like, are we running out of steam here?
Dude,
not the podcast Rock Docs, which clearly is just finding its footing now.
Yes. No.
It's never been better.
I agree with you.
People are saying that.
It does make me think that the industry, like the entertainment complex that is responsible for creating new rock docs, I'm like, oh boy, this is like when you start to get the like blueberry donut muffin stout beer, and you're like, maybe craft beer sucks actually, and everyone was wrong about this.
Maybe I'm short craft beer now.
That's kind of how I felt about rock
are we
docs
short?
as a whole. I'm gonna
Can we short music documentaries? Is there a way to do that?
We could find
using
a way to
Bitcoin or something.
Yeah.
Some sophisticated financial engineering.
Anyway. Way to make a market for this. Yeah.
Well, somebody's got to rescue. We need a revelatory rock doc that'll revitalize the industry. Somebody's going to come out with one, and we'll be excited about it. And I don't want to have a bad time.
Maybe Pavement. Maybe the new Pavement movie, which is not strictly a rock doc. Maybe that'll encourage us to
could be
the good in the world again.
Yeah, exactly. But there's more juice to be squeezed, I think. But this wasn't it. Anyway, so there you go.
I did listen. I did give first listen in probably 5 years to front to back Led Zeppelin debut. Ripping album. Great album.
Sure, right.
Been a long
Good
time
times,
since I
bad
listened to that. I'll
You're here to recommend Led Zeppelin.
That's one thing that this movie did, was it inspired me to go listen to that album again.
And you had a good time.
Maybe
because they only made 2 albums.
Yeah,
so you could just you'd tear through the discography like taking your kid to camp and back.
So maybe if you're listening to this and you haven't watched the movie yet, just do that. Just go listen to Led Zeppelin,
and you'll have a good time.
Yeah. I mean, actually, I take that back because I didn't hate it.
I'm not watching it again.
I'm never watching it again. I will never watch it again. No.
Like when I rented it, it was one of those deals where it was like you could pay $6.99 to rent it or $8.99 to buy it. And I'm like, should I buy this? I'm like, I'm going to cheap out on the $2. Glad I did.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad I just waited 2 more days and got it on Netflix.
If only I'd known. All right.
Yeah.
There you go. This has been Rock Docs. And thank you for listening. Sorry if you like this movie. Sorry we ruined your good time.
I got my first drum kit when I was 10.
I was listening to rock and roll coming from America.
Well, that's a sound I would really like to make.
John's wife used to say, "Don't you dare play with that Planty. He's a complete disaster."
I'm going to form my own band, and I know what it is that I want to do with it.
Oh, Jimmy's forming a band. You should give him a call. So I did.
The first time we played together, you could tell it was going to be a good group.
It was an electric atmosphere, and that had been what I'd been waiting for.
Jimmy produced the album.
I wanted it to be something that they hadn't heard before.
A press who didn't seem to like us.
It got ripped to pieces. People wouldn't even book the band.
Our manager, Peter Grant, gets a tour together in America.
We're backstage at the Filmore, and Peter says, "If you don't crack it here, it's over."
So we were going to go in there like with a hatchet. Everyone knew that was a life-changing experience.
We toured for months on end.
It was a whirlwind.
People are bashing down the doors to get him.
It's just absolutely ridiculous.
I was just out there throwing it up in the air.
We just recorded what we liked.
It really dovetailed together.
You're going to be called Led Zeppelin.
And I thought, that's a terrible name. But I couldn't come up with a better one, so Led Zeppelin we were.